You know, one of my favorite television shows, among several, is Andy Griffith. How many like Andy Griffith? Oh, yeah. I remember when he first came on, I love it now he's on, especially when he pulls those jokes and tricks on Barney. Just tears me up. Then there's another character on Andy Griffith that had such a following that did a spin-off show. Remember who that was? Gomer. Thank you. Appreciate that. Gomer Pye. He had to be one of the most naive, uncoordinated Marines I ever saw in my life. I wonder how he ever made it through. But one of his most infamous lines, I'm sure everybody knows it, everybody repeats it, golly, surprise, surprise, surprise. Y'all remember that? Everything was surprise, surprise, surprise. What a shock. Surprise to Cheryl this morning when she looked up and the candles already lit. We all have surprises every now and then. Most everything was a monumental surprise to Gomer. You can say that a lot of things are monumental human events that take place as a surprise. I mean, marriage is a surprise. You don't really set out generally to marry somebody, it just kind of evolves. Birth of a child is a surprise. Even if a woman's trying to get pregnant, when it finally happens, it's a surprise. Then the actual birth, it's a surprise. It's a boy, it's a girl, it's one of each, it's more than one. Death is also a surprise. Death catches us unsuspectingly and unexpectedly. Even when we get the news that we have a terminal disease or illness, death is still a surprise at the moment it occurs. Illness is a surprise. The number of people who were surprised to find out they were COVID-19 positive, even taking all the precautions. No one intentionally sets out to catch the worst case of flu. But after it's over, it's remembered as a monumentous event. Now, there are those who surprise us and make us wonder where their intelligence ran off to when they hold or attend COVID-19 parties in an attempt to catch the stupid thing. Because they don't believe what they're told until they and their families are surprised to find them dying in intensive care from something that they thought wasn't that bad. Humor is also a surprise that catches us. Otherwise, it wouldn't be humor. A legal firm once sent flowers to an associate upon opening a new office. And through some mix-up, the ribbon was bedecked. The floral arrangement read, "Deep Sympathy." And when the florist was informed of his mistake, he cried out in alarm, "Good heavens! Those flowers were meant to go to a funeral that said, 'Congratulations on your new location.'" The greatest thing about Christmas morning is the surprises. When else in life do you get a pile of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 surprises all together and sit for an hour enjoying each of them, one after another? Surprise after surprise. Christmas morning is a wonderful way of making us help remember the days we used to have as a child. The amazement, the astonishment, the surprise. How many of you ever surprised by what was on the tree at Christmas as a kid? You thought, well, I'm not going to get it. And there that gift is. Or you never even expected to get it. Poof, it appears. It says from Santa. You know, it's astonishing. Surprise of what's under the tree on Christmas morning. The fun as parents watching the kids on Christmas morning. Now the grandchildren too. Trying to find their presents. Whereas the thing getting up before my parents did, going out, by the time they got up, all the gifts had been sorted. We knew whose stack was where, you know. So as that toy usually been played with by that time. Chuck Swindoll writes, Surprise comes in many forms and guises. Some good, some borderline amazing, some awful, some tragic, some hilarious. There's one thing we usually say: surprises aren't boring. Surprises are woven through the very fabric of our lives. They await each one of us at unexpected, unpredictable junctions. This morning, on this fourth and final week of Advent, we focus on one of the greatest surprises there ever was. The surprise that took place when an angel by the name of Gabriel appeared to a young teenager by the name of Mary. And Gabriel piled one surprise upon another. Mary and Joseph's Christmas tree had more astonishing surprises than any couple on earth had ever experienced. Christmas is now 5 days away. How many have all your shopping done? All your gifts wrapped? Ready to go? How many still have some to do? How many still have to start? We have 5 days. And it's surely true that virtually everyone in America has seen or heard some part of the Christmas message. Joy to the world, the Lord has come. Somewhere, either by kids, junior choirs in schools, congregations, or even on the TV set or radio. Every day the mail brings cards announcing, Noel, Noel, born is the King of Israel. Even billboards and storehands display signs and ads that proclaim peace on earth, goodwill to all. Though the truth of Christmas is in the air everywhere, it's hard for most people to receive the message seriously. Even if the words of Christmas were heard, they crash against the realities of our lives, especially this year. Families with missing loved ones because of the virus. There was violence that caused problems and injuries because of political fanatics. Loss of income due to the loss of employment. Eviction from homes. Lack of income to even buy or put food on the table for a family. It makes it hard to hear those words of the Christmas message by those going through these realities of life, causing them to doubt or dismiss them. And some have little room in their heart for anything save weariness. Oh, come all ye faithful, joyful, and triumphant, urges the Christmas card that came in the mail yesterday, along with 3 joyless bills, a catalog, and the most untriumphant overdue utility bill. All around, people see and hear the good tidings of great joy. You shrug your shoulders and say, how can this be? This is precisely the way in which the good news of Christmas was first received. While the angel Gabriel's news to Mary is unlike the news any of us will ever receive, our response may parallel hers when we experience God's presence in our lives. Remember, here's Mary, a young, poor female. All characteristics that to the people of her day would make her seem unusable by God for any major task. But God chose Mary for one of the most important acts of obedience He's ever demanded of anyone. You may feel that your ability, your experience, or education makes you an unlikely candidate for God's service. Don't limit God's choices. He can use you if you trust Him. But Gabriel discloses to her the overwhelming, wonderful, and awful news that she would bear a son who would be called the Son of the Most High, whose kingdom has no end. She didn't need any dance for joy, that's for sure, or sing triumphantly, or rush out and find the bassinet. Instead, her first response was to cast down her eyes and say, and to wonder aloud, how can this be? What a lady Mary must have been. chosen above the ruling families of her day. This humble peasant girl would give birth to the Son of God. While many of us are not comfortable in evaluating Mary or elevating Mary to the quality of character or high level of preeminence given by others, we are surely aware that her quality of character, her response of submission to God, reflects the best of noble living. Luke, the Gospel writer, can be thanked for giving us this brief yet important insight into Mary, and for holding her up as a model of what it means to be a Christian. Luke is quite clear to detail this. The Son of the Most High would not just appear out of heaven, untouched by human flesh. He'd be divine, to be sure. But like all human life, he would come by way of birth. When the angel Gabriel, hero of God, appeared to Mary with such earth-shaking news, unsettling her life, her first response was fear heightened by confusion. That's the kind of fear we could well understand. It's what we feel, that sense of overpowering awe when the divine touches our own humanity, interrupts our ordinary lives each day. Her reply, "How can this be?" was the honest response of a heart that did not understand. Again, Mary is one of us. We also are often not prepared to receive the Word of God, especially when it comes to us, and so we do not know how to respond to it. In his Confessions, Book 8, Chapter 12, St. Augustine tells of his confusion when he experienced God's call to salvation and holy living. Like Moses and Jeremiah, we wonder if God knows what he's doing when he calls us to certain tasks of ministry. We may even wonder if God has called us and entrusted us with a special task, or if we're only imagining it. Are we capable of responding to God's unexpected news? Like Mary, we wonder, how can this be? You know, it's a surprise. We look back on life and discover for the first time that we've been carried through some of our toughest times because of our faith in God through Christ. It's quite a revelation. It's quite a surprise. Uncertainty and confusion may be our initial reaction when God breaks into our lives with unexpected news. This news may be that we hear for the first time that he loves us and forgives us, even though we feel unlovable and too guilty to be forgiven. This news may be that God is calling us to accept people as brothers and sisters who we think are not worthy of being in our family. Well, this news may be that God is calling us to serve him in a different way or a different place than we do now. We recognize that this is God's news to us. Humble acceptance and obedience should follow. Frank S. Mead once wrote a story entitled The VIP. In his story, the small town of Mayfield is excited or anticipated the arrival of a rich and important stranger. His name's Henry Baskin, who's coming to spend Christmas in their town. The whole town turns out to meet him at the airport, but he's nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, a quiet man slips by the people at the airport and heads into town. This quiet man doesn't appear to be a man of means. He's ignored and mistreated by the insensitive people in Mayfield. They're all caught up in the Christmas frenzy of materialism and shallow pageantry. They don't have time to spend talking with a stranger in their midst. But finally, a poor old gentleman invites a stranger home for a meager meal with his family. After dinner, that stranger returns to the airport, where two men are taking down this sign saying, welcoming Henry Basket. And one of them remarks to the other one, I can't believe we missed him. He must be in town somewhere, but we missed him. And the stranger, unnoticed by the two men, climbs onto a plane and leaves behind the town of Mayfair. That could happen in our town, couldn't it? That could happen in our churches. That could happen to our celebration of Christmas. We get so wrapped up in the frenzy of materialism and shallow pageantry that we could miss the Christ child altogether. This is why on this Sunday before Christmas, we need to go right to the heart of the Christmas story. When do we get struck with the simplicity of the Christmas message? Remember, Gabriel told Mary, the Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. It's not to be minimized either by the prosaic example of Elizabeth's conception in old age. Remind us of Abraham and Sarah's predicament, nor the summary statement of the angel, with God nothing will be impossible. And with that, Mary stepped forward in faith to live out her call. They sang peace on earth in times when bloody warfare was about. Joy to the world in lands of sadness. Glory to the newborn king in a society of callous rulers and self-serving governments. These words are either idle whistling in the dark, or with God nothing will be impossible. The choice is ours. Do we believe the hopeless word that weighs us down, or the angel's promise that tugs at our hearts? Mary's response is not based on what she could accomplish, for she was a virgin, but on what God could accomplish through her. Mary was a virgin. Elizabeth was old and past childbearing years. When God gave us unexpected news of what He will do for us and through us, we should remember with Mary that we are His servants, and that it will be according to His word and His power. See, God's favor doesn't automatically bring instant success or fame. His blessing on Mary, the honor of being the mother of the Messiah, would lead to much pain. Her peers would ridicule her. Her fiancé would come close to leaving her. Her son would be rejected and murdered. But through her son would come the world's only hope. And this is why Mary has been praised by countless generations as a young girl who found favor with God. Her submission was part of God's plan to bring about our salvation. If sorrow weighs you down and dims your hope, think of Mary. And wait patiently for God to finish working out His plan. I want to share with you a story from Peter Bolin about invitation from the Christ child. It seems a woman visited a tourist town and stopped to see a cathedral. And as she stared at the beautiful stained glass windows, a feeling of peace washed over her. And she had felt that way since childhood. And she had a deep yearning to attend church again. And kneeling before the Christmas scene, she studied the figures of the Christ child, whose arms were outstretched. And she wished with all of her heart that those child's arms were reaching out to her. She remembered Christmas of long ago when her family would attend church together. The nativity was lit up by colored lights and the smell of pine boughs scented the church. And afterwards, friends invited her family to breakfast. Then returned home, sharing the fun and laughter, and then exchanging gifts. They sip hot chocolate, listen to the bell-toll Christmas joy throughout the town. The peace and love and warmth now seem so far away. Christmas was lonely and cold. She had gone to church in many years because of rebellion as a young woman. The pain, the bitterness of remembering seared her heart. And as tears fell, she felt a gentle hand on her shoulder. And a kindly priest looked down at her. "Father, I'm so miserable," she blurted. She told him the story of her rebellion and bitterness, her loneliness, and her fear of going back to church. And he replied, "The church is for people still suffering. Jesus has already forgiven you." These words rang in her head long after that priest had left her. She felt bitterness slipping away. She knows that the Christ child was with her. God's announcement of a child to be born was met with various responses throughout Scripture. Sarah, Abraham's wife, laughed. Zechariah doubted. By contrast, Mary submitted. She believed the angel's words and agreed to bear the child, even under humanly impossible circumstances. God is able to do the impossible. Mary's response was, "Behold, I am a handmaid of the Lord. Let it be to me according to your word." And placed herself in God's hands, she fulfilled the highest work of faith, obedience. Little could she have known then what that meant for her to be chosen of God. In but a few months, there would be a long and weary road to Bethlehem. The night in the stable, the birthing of her son on straw and placed in a feeding trough. There grew to be a man, she would see him abused and hurled, abused by skeptics and fickle crowds that did not understand. Finally, she'd see him bear his cross on a road to Calvary, and there die an unseemly death. This is what it means to be chosen of God. For Mary and each of us, the answer is yes. The road that leads to the abundant life seems always to go by the way of the cross. Mary is an example of faith validated, not to be questioned of what might have been, but by obedience. Let it be according to your word. This week, as the events of Advent draw near to Christmas Day, our attention will be focused in many ways. Families will gather, gifts will be given and received, meals will be eaten, and good memories will be built for future recollection. This is as it should be. But may I ask one other thing? Will you this week draw aside for a while from the bustle of activity to be alone with God? And there along with Mary, allow your hearts to speak the words they truly want to speak. Lord, whatever your will for me, let it be according to your word. Amen.